for 28.5 million. That's sort of a drop in the bucket, so it looks like a big number, but it's about 0.5%. So nothing too significant. Otherwise, budget and actual, everything was relatively close. If you had any questions, I'm sure that Pauline would be happy to let you know why something went under or over. Page 83. So pages 83 through 87. This is a new initiative, and it was new last year actually. This is the second year. This is an initiative by the state. It's called their MTP. What they're trying to do is they're trying to gather up every community's expenditures on both the school side and the municipal side, if there is one, and set up a portal where you can go and compare how much each school is spending on a significant item. So under salaries, how much you're spending on employee benefits. They want to be able to make it comparable so they can run their reports and see everything. So this is the second year. You were the first people to be part of this program last year. So this is our second year doing it. So it just goes to show that the district is very much ahead of the curve compared to the majority of the people that we're working with. On page 115. Page 115 is our single audit report. So there's two things that we do when we issue a single audit report. Two areas that we find on. The first is your internal controls. And if we have any significant issues with your internal controls, any significant deficiencies, material weaknesses, something that really needs to be improved, this is where we bring it to your attention. We did not have anything in our single audit section that would, or in our internal controls testing that we deemed necessary to bring to your attention. Very good internal controls within the district. The second thing we do is we test for compliance with major federal programs. So the federal government has passed money through the state to the district, and this year we picked the special education program. So under the special education program, we go through, we make sure that the costs that you've spent the federal money on, that they're allowable. We make sure that that it's spent within the proper time period, that the proper reporting has been completed, and happy to say that through all our compliance testing, we didn't have any issues to bring here. No non-compliance. For the most part, that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer. If you want to follow up at a later date too, we're always reachable. So.
Anyone have any questions? I want to thank you. I really thank Pauline and her staff as well for another outstanding audit report. Thank you for coming here and explaining it all. This is, what did we say, 12 or 13 years without any significant findings coming through from them. So it's great to be able to say that. I'm not sure you can find that in a lot of places, but it's nice to know.
Thank you.
All right, but thank you.
Yes, now
We need a vote. Can all in favor of accepting and approving the audit report?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. And I'm going to continue down because there's more people that are here for this. I want to skip the other. Yeah, and go to the high school. Hold on. We'll vote after they're done. So if I can, is there anything else, Pauline? I don't miss anything.
I just wanted to thank Kyle and his team. They're wonderful to work with, and just thank you so much.
Be safe. If I can call on our high school principal, Dr. Deacon, we can go to the high school diploma system now, and then we can go on the other things after. Okay. So if you don't mind, with your team.
Caitlin Booth, for those of you who do not know Caitlin, Caitlin is a math teacher at the high school, but also wears many hats. She's also the coordinator of our extended day program. This year she has taken on a couple of new roles also as our graduation portfolio coordinator, as well as our virtual learning coordinator. So she kind of oversees a lot of that, while also teaching some math classes and working every day until 5:15 an extended day, and in the process of doing her administrative internship. So she does an awful lot within our district, and we're very, very lucky to have her. And also her sidebar there of Jody Neves, who is our ELA teacher leader, also wears many hats, also does an awful lot in our school and in our community, and they have both been an integral part of working with our committee of teachers who have worked on our system. So they're going to do the bulk of the presentation. And as always, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
So we're just going to give you an overview of what we came up with in terms of a redesign on our graduation portfolio. So the first thing, just want to step back. Last spring, we started to look at this in terms of how we're going to redesign the system to better suit our students' needs, because right now we were kind of feeling like it wasn't working out the way we wanted to. We're not getting the product that we want out of our students, or what we think our students are capable of. So I'm just going to first set the stage for you. So if we think about, everything we do in the school relates to our core values. So just to reiterate, our core values are respect, responsibility, honesty, integrity, intellectual curiosity, and perseverance. That is the umbrella over which we do everything. And then we go on to implementing those through our beliefs about learning. And so this is a summary of our beliefs about learning. Students learn best when they're in a trusted and supportive environment. Students should experience equal opportunities to work independently and collaboratively. Students should have choices in their education based on their unique learning style and their future goals. They should be engaged in challenging curricula that provides opportunity to solve authentic and real-world problems. And then that technology is a vital instructional tool to enhance and support our learning. So those are kind of the two things that we are using to frame our work. And then we also have to consider the academic competencies or expectations, so that we want all of our students to be able to read for a variety of purposes, write for a variety of purposes, listen and speak for a variety of purposes, solve complex problems, and then access, utilize, and evaluate information, media, and technology. So that's what we're trying to accomplish through our graduation portfolio. So when the team met, we really took a step back from the academic competencies, because we really do feel like that's where we want to hone in on the students, that some students really, writing might be not their strength, so we don't want to force them to show their writing. We want them to be able to personalize and show what they're really passionate about and what their experiences are in high school and have been like. So from that, we kind of went to, well, what do all students really need to be able to do in order to be successful? So we started by talking about what our vision for our portfolio or graduation assessment is going to be. So we decided we want an assessment system in which students are provided with authentic learning opportunities that foster reflection and growth, and that upon a graduation, students will demonstrate proficiency in each competency and justify their readiness through their own personalized learning experience. So we really want it to be up to the student what they present and how they present it. So we ended up coming up with, as a team, was the big three. Sorry. Okay, where's my spinner there? And those big three are the skills that we feel are really the cornerstones for success upon graduation, regardless of what career or pathway that you're going to take. So whether it's college or to a technical program or direct to work, whatever it is, but students really need to be able to communicate, think critically, and problem solve. And so that was where we settled on those things. That's what we were really looking for our students. And from there, we created rubrics and broke them down into components. So if we want to look at the rubrics that we created, the first is the communication. So ultimately, what does good communication look like? So a good communicator can control and support their ideas. They can develop a main idea and then have evidence to support what they're organize those ideas so that you can understand what's being presented and the flow of the argument or what they're trying to say. And then you can appeal to the audience. So you change the vocabulary or the anecdotal evidence or your tone of voice depending on who you speak to. And then that you choose the format to present that fits kind of your purpose. So are you standing in front of the school committee presenting, or are you presenting to your peers, or maybe it would look what you would choose to present to, or to students, even like younger students. You know, that would all change how your presentation looks. So the components for critical thinking then are conceptualizing or identifying and describing information, applying that information outside of the classroom to new problems or new areas, analyzing that, breaking it down into pieces and looking for key factors, causes and effects, comparing and contrasting depending on the purpose of the assignment, and then synthesizing, so being able to take that information from multiple sources and kind of move through it to analyze and come to a decision. And then last but not least, problem solving. So the first thing is really to identify the problem. Do you know that there is a problem and what it is? And then make a plan to solve it. Go through and the actual plan and implement it, and then be able to take a step back and look back and say, you know, how did I do? Did I identify the wrong problem, or was my plan not so great, or was it the implementation? Because any of those things obviously could be the issue, and that's sometimes the most important thing is that looking back and reflecting.
What are the other headings in the rubric?
So that's just the levels at which the students could achieve.
Yeah.
So it's broken down into
Advanced, proficient.
developing and emerging.
So in order for this, they need to be at the proficient or
Proficient,
advanced?
yes. Upon graduation.
Okay.
For graduation. So then ultimately what we're looking for is like, what is the expectation at graduation? So we want students to provide evidence that they are proficient in each one of those components. So each of the big three are then broken down into 4 components. So they need to show they are proficient in each of those components. But how they choose to do that could be a variety of ways and is really ultimately depend on their experiences and their personal kind of pathway. So they could use the common tasks or common assessments from courses. They could also use school-related extracurricular activities or projects that they're involved in, or they could even use personal experiences from outside the school. Our students are doing a lot of things that are really great that we don't even necessarily get to see because it's outside the school, and we really want them to be able to kind of showcase that for us. So if you are, you know, doing community service at the nursing home, we want to you're going to do a lot of problem solving and communicating and thinking critically there. So if that's your passion and that's helping you decide where you want to go with life, then we'd certainly like to hear about it in your senior presentation, because that could be the foundation of like a decision you're making about life. Also, there's within the school, we have a lot of students involved in the drama program or the arts. You know, they're involved in art shows that are outside of school, and we want to see that work, and that those could be pieces that they use for evidence within their showing their proficiency. So they're going to defend that they are in fact proficient, and then also describe their growth as a student throughout the high school and as an individual, you know, big changes that they've undergone or where they feel they are versus where they started. And then also where are they headed? What's their plan right now? Because ultimately we want them to have a plan and be thinking about what they're doing. It might not be 100%, you know, decided, you know, when I've changed my mind a million times. So we can allow it for them, but, and then just to talk about also, you know, if this is your plan, how has what you've done within high school helped you come to that decision and like helped you on that pathway? Plus, because I feel like maybe we have questions already, so let me know if you do. So it's like a big piece. Yes.
Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself, and maybe you're going to do this next, but when it comes to the evaluation of this type of presentation, how is it a subjective? Who and how is doing that analysis, doing that evaluation of the presentation, and making the determination as to whether or not they reach the proficient or advanced level of each of those categories? And you know, I understand that there's sort of some detail in there, but it also seems like a bit of a subjective standard as to what constitutes meeting a particular level within there. So I'm just curious. How you thought about that?
Students will be assessed on the big three within their, sorry.
Thank you.
Students will be assessed on the big three and the components within the classroom. So as teachers are creating assessments and revising assessments, they'll be choosing the components for in-class assignments that they reflect, and then we'll be giving feedback based on how they met or didn't meet the proficiency requirements there. So that those would already be assessed. We are still working on the system for the outside of school, how students will like bring those things from outside of school and how they'll be assessed. But ultimately, I think it's going to be they'll propose it, and then we'll bring it to someone who has that content, or who can, even within the organization they're working, who can kind of check for them, that they can evaluate them on those things. So that's kind of like the outside of school stuff. We're still working on that process. The presentation itself will be given to a panel of teachers similar to how it is done now. And there is a rubric that we've created that kind of outlines the pieces of what the students are expected. So they have to be able to explain and defend that they're proficient in each of the areas. So this is communication, the critical thinking, and then the problem solving. So have they done that? And they're going to create their presentation. So what that looks like is really going to be individual to the student, because they could have a lot of different things from different classes that they use, or they could have been involved in a major assessment. So a lot of students I know will work on a pretty significant science fair project, and through that they could ultimately have demonstrated their proficient in all of those components through that like kind of year-long process. And so then they would really be doing a presentation that is their science fair project, or someone else might create like a gallery of artwork and then show how that artwork demonstrates the different components through that. So it's going to look very different by the student, I guess is.
And thank you. And I guess I understand from that answer that the expectation is not that whatever this final presentation is necessarily something brand new that they've created for it. It could be something that's they've been working on and building on over the course of a year, or even the entire 4 years that they've been here, or even longer than that, perhaps, if they've stuck with something for a long time.
Yeah, so the presentation itself is really where they're doing the presentation of that work, but where they do the work could come from a lot of different parts of their journey. So it's the panel then is assessing how they delivered it. A lot of the actual artifacts or evidence that they're using will already have been assessed by a content teacher for those things. But the panel will be assessing, were they able to explain that they're proficient? Were they able to really justify the panel that they are proficient in those areas? And then, the other pieces that we asked about is the growth and then the future planning. Did they do that? And were they able to give a proficient presentation in terms of posture and language and volume, those things?
So to also answer your question, it's really important to us to keep it open to those things so that students, so that they're choosing something that they're passionate about. We want kids to really be reflective, and we want it to be something that they want to present and say, this really shows how I've grown as a student and as an individual over the course of the last 4 years. And so for us to allow students that opportunity, we have to keep it pretty broad and pretty flexible.
Yeah, so right now the ninth graders are the only ones who will be in this system, and the rest of the students in the school have an option and are kind of like our pilots, and I keep telling them, like, you're my guinea pig. So I think the sky's the limit. We don't know how much the students can do and what they want to do. They've had some really great ideas just in brainstorming with me about, like, hey, I'm doing this. Can I possibly do that? Like, how does it fit? And I just say, like, okay, so tell me, like, how is that showing your communication or your critical thinking? And if they can do that, and then, it's like we can work with your teachers about getting that assessed so that that content person, I'm not an art teacher, so I definitely cannot help you in that art realm. So, we have to reach out to those teachers to help, but the ideas are coming from the students, and so I think we're trying to open up the box rather than kind of close it in.
And I think it's also important to note that what Caitlin said, that the presentation itself will look, we anticipate very different from one student to another. You might have one student doing a movie, creating a movie. Another student, creating some type of an art gallery, or as Caitlin said, and you might have a student doing a PowerPoint presentation. So I think it's exciting, and but also, based on what that student's interests and passions are.
First of all, thanks for taking some of our comments into consideration
because as I talked about it before in previous years, the most engaging and most excited and you knew most successful to be, that's really not good English, but you get it. Students were the ones who were really passionate about what they were talking about. And were able to integrate music, for example, into history and science and all of the things that they do outside of their passions. So I think it's great that you're taking this step. It's a huge step to take. But I also understand what Adam brought up a little bit, and I'll go back to that. The major problem that I've always had with the presentation is that subjective grading. So when we have a student who presents a writing sample, for example, to demonstrate their writing skills, and the writing sample has a 4 on it, and it really should only be a 1, we have to accept the 4 because that's what was the grade that was given on the paper. And that's concerning for me to see that student think that they are proficient in writing when they're not. So how do we work around, as Adam said, that subjective part of it? I understand that a lot of it is, by its very nature, somewhat subjective. But are you going to screen them ahead of time so that you can say to them, gee, have you read this sentence out loud? Have you really seen what you put down before you present it? Or are you sort of just going to not really worry about that?
I think the answer is twofold, actually. So there is the fact that in the presentation, the students are being asked to explain why they are proficient or advanced in that area. So the panel is really assessing their explanation. Can they defend it? Can they use the criteria from the rubric to say that they are in fact meeting that? And so I would venture to say that potentially if it's really a 1 and it says a 4, like I don't think that's necessarily going to happen because it would be hard to defend that statement. But also we are working on school-wide calibration of and creation of the rubrics and the grading of them so that the teachers are on the same page in terms of what makes it a 3, what makes it a 4, and like working from that, the teacher support side as well to ensure that the inconsistency isn't there.
Can you explain a little bit about calibration and benchmarking?
All right, so we have created the assessment validation cycle, which actually I can show you a picture of it, and you guys got it. Yeah, so in terms of when we're talking about assessing students within the classroom, there's the process of creating an assessment and ensuring that it is authentic and does match to the standards. And then there's creating the rubric or how it is going to be assessed, and that's where we're matching that to the big 3 and identifying which components are being assessed. And then calibrating it to see okay, so are all teachers who are giving this assessment coming up with the same grade at the end? So
Okay.
Can we look and say, this is what's fundamental for a person to get proficient, this is what's fundamental for developing for advanced, and then that